Hi, I want to make a quick and kind of contrived video about understanding how things are beyond your control and how that can make you come to terms with things better. And I want to use the ultimate example of, say, pressing the red button. And when you press the red button, you come to a conclusion. When, say, a fly, you have the option to choose to press the red button, but then something takes beyond that control beyond you, and out of nowhere, such as a fly landing on the button and it presses the button for you, you come to terms with it easier. When you have to make the decision yourself, not only does it weigh upon you more, you have to come to, when you know you have to make a decision, obviously it makes it feel like you have more control of the decision, therefore there's more weight on you in making that decision. And when something is beyond your control, even though you know the mechanism that's working or the choice that has to be made, you know that if it's beyond your control, the decision, the weight of the decision could be on someone else, and you come to terms with that decision regardless of what you would have chosen. You would have come to terms with the decision, say, more if something was beyond your control, because you would have had been forced to be forced to come to forced to accept a decision made more than, say, otherwise, that you would make the decision, because obviously if you're thinking about the decision when you have to make a decision, therefore this decision in the end is going to mean more in the process of making the decision and in the process of finally coming to a conclusion and making that decision in the end. And that's exactly what makes the decision mean anything. So yes, when things are beyond your control, you have a more, in a way, of accepting things. You didn't have to go through the process of thinking about the thing, even though you can understand the mechanism or the choice that had to be made. It means less when you had when something was beyond your control, and when something was beyond your control, you come to terms with things. Generally speaking, better than having to make the decision yourself, because the pressure of, say, making a decision means more. And it means more to, say, an individual than the outcome that means anything. It's the process of making a decision that makes the outcome mean all the more. And when you have to make the decision, the outcome is almost in a way less important, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean as much in the end once something's been taken out of your control. And once something's been taken out of your control, you find more comfort in the idea, because you realize that you had no control over circumstance. Sort of like being forced and thrust into situations that you don't want to be in. Once you know you were forced into those situations, you feel more comfortable in fulfilling those satisfactions or those desires. Sort of like in life, if you had the choice to choose life, you probably wouldn't have chosen life. But now that you've chosen life, you've made the best of the option that was given to you. You had no choice; it just exists, and you were a victim of the circumstance. And since you were a victim of the circumstance, you're making the most of it, because you were forced and thrust into a want game, into a self-fulfilling mechanism that only wants you to want more, to satisfy more, and only to want to fulfill the mechanism more and more and more and more. And that's exactly the mechanism that we're stuck in. But if we had the choice beforehand to exist, and we were just brought into a room and for 5 minutes to make a decision, it would mean, if it's an easier decision or a harder decision, but recognizing, say, if there was something on the line for our existence, we needed us to exist, we would save someone else, or whatever contrivance you can think of saying, having good outweigh the bad. And if the decision's beyond your control, such as it is now, you're more likely to make the most of a certain situation when it comes to life in general. Say, existing in general. But when it comes to something that you have control over, and understanding the implications of something, or understanding exactly how something may end up turning out, or understanding the decision or the implications of something happening, you might understand more. The decision will mean more to you in the end if you have to make the decision personally. And I guess that's what this boils down to. And when you don't have to make it, you're more likely to accept any outcome, regardless of the outcome that you would have picked, even if it were contrary to the outcome that you would have picked. And that's exactly what means something, I guess. So you're more likely to come to terms with a bad decision if it were beyond your control. But when you have to make the decision yourself, the decision seems all the more in peril, because you have to make the decision and weigh the good and the bad, and you have to know that it's on your hands. It could be an ego thing as well, but also understanding that it was in your control, and accepting the bad when it was under your control, you feel more responsible for that bad thing that's happening. or whatever it may be, and understanding the implications of everything, you feel more responsible because the actions were taken yourself. But when they're beyond your control, or when you know that something happened beyond your control, that was beyond your control, beyond this physical mechanism and your awareness of reality, and the thing that would have changed something, when something just happens and changes on its own, and you were only just a piece in the mechanism, and you weren't the thing that pressed the button. You were just a piece that caused, the interaction that happened to begin with. You happened to be there, therefore the fly landed on the button, it landed, and it caused the button to cause the destruction. And as opposed to you directly pressing it yourself, coming to a conscious conclusion of your psychological interaction and making a decision and pressing the button yourself intentionally, you were just a part of the interaction. And that's another distinction in making responsibility, and knowing that the responsibility only lies in your extent when you know that you've taken a thorough understanding and interaction with something, such as you physically pressing the button with your finger, thinking the process through beforehand, and understanding the distinctions between all these different mechanisms that can make distinctions, and understanding how you can press the button intentionally or press the button accidentally. Your physical being pressed it, but you accidentally pressed it because you twitched or something, and understanding these distinctions between psychology and reality, how they interact, how you take responsible for things, and how we make these distinctions, say in first degree or second degree or manslaughter or third degree murder, and understanding those distinctions and how they mean something in the end, and understanding the mechanism that's in control of us, the circumstances that create us, and understanding that we're part of, we're enforcing those circumstances that create us, because we actively became a victim of the circumstance, but took the mechanism in our circumstance in our own hands and decided to use it for our own manipulation, use it to manipulate the circumstances under our own intentional purposes that we have. And that's exactly the mechanism that we're reinforcing, if anything. So when something's beyond your control, you feel like a more need. If a fly landed on the destruction button and you were thinking about it thoroughly, it's like, oh, it destroyed, oh my goodness. But it wouldn't have been as devastating. Obviously, you can have a negative reaction to something, but that doesn't mean the negative reaction was going to be as bad as if you had to make the decision and you'd live with the guilt, say, afterwards. It could be a different reaction, but the action will more likely be negative, even if the reaction's delayed and you don't realize it because you made the decision. If you twitch, there's these distinctions you can make. If something beyond your control, or something, using a classic kind of cartoonish example like that, like a fly landing on the button, that can be a good example of describing a situation like that. You're more likely to accept it, viscerally reacting, because you're going to viscerally react to the fly landing on the button, while you made a conscious decision to press the button. You regret it later on, and that ends up having a greater negative impact, at least in that certain circumstance. And say, you don't take action in doing something, that can lead to a better outcome. You think doing something is going to create a better interaction. In of itself, you think it will, and it may, but at the end, it may lead to something worse. But generally speaking, we can understand these interactions and the distinctions, and how interactions can generally mean better or worse for certain circumstances. And beyond a reasonable doubt, we can only expect so much in the future, and it's a circumstance now that means something. So when you press the button, the circumstance that matters now is pressing the button or not pressing the button. And the implications that happen later on obviously mean something, but we can only go so far in understanding what the implications mean in the future. So we have to go based on the circumstance. But that doesn't mean necessarily, if you make a mistake, that the mistake you make from that circumstance won't create a better future than doing the thing that you wanted to do originally. So you can learn from that mistake, and that can create a better future, or whatever, a better outcome in the end, leading to a future, or whatever it may be, leading to some end outcome. It could lead to a better end outcome than, say, if you actually got to do the things that you wanted to do, and you fulfilled the desire, or whatever it may be, that you wanted to satisfy. Sometimes you don't satisfy, but it can lead to learning a lesson, or whatever it may be, and satisfying something, and it can lead to a better end in the end than you would have expected. But things are going to happen a certain way. That's the illusion of choice that we have as well, and understanding how things are going to work, and things are going to happen a certain way, and once they've happened, that's a thing that was going to happen. That's an easy mechanism to understand. Free will, yeah, but we have to understand things that happen now are based on things that happened before, and that's exactly where we are now, and they're going to lead into a future, and the future is going to be something in the past based on an interaction that happened before, and that's going to be an interaction that we look back at and understand that led up to where we are now, and interacting with the how we're interacting now, because it's interactions that mean something, yes. It's interactions that we're having into the future, and the interactions are going to become a thing of the past, and that describes, based on interactions, being a victim of the mechanism, the crude forces controlling all these things, these commodities, and leading into the future. And the future means something but it means something once it's in the past, and the past means something, creating something where we are now. So the future is going to be the past, and the past is going to be somewhere where we are now, looking at and understanding the past, and that's where it means something is looking from the past now and taking things from the past and understanding that led us to where we are now, and understanding the mechanism of interaction that's leading to the future is going to be the interaction that becomes part of the past, is an interaction that we're part of right now. It's going to become part of the past, create the cause and effect interaction, understanding that things interacting are going to inevitably going to interact in a certain way because they're a thing of the past leading up to where we are now. And that's exactly the mechanism that we're part of, is a mechanism of just interactions and consequences and things happening a certain way based on previous interactions, based on this tower, this tower that we keep building, and it's based on how the rest of the tower is built, and that's how we're building. We're building on the foundation of how the rest of the tower was built. The line continues from the previous part of the line. It's a linear line that keeps moving in whatever direction. It doesn't really matter. It's the same line. It's moving in a certain way. Sort of like you keep building on a foundation. It's crooked over here, but you keep building on that crookedness. You keep building on it. What if that means anything? You're based on a foundation of the previous brick that you built, and it's the previous brick that you're building the next brick off of. Even if the previous brick was kind of crooked, you're building off that brick to go to somewhere else, and that's exactly the mechanism that we're working on. Only the contrivances of the bricks and how they don't mean as much as, say, the foundation of a good building. The intention of creating a foundation in a building that means something. The different things don't mean much in the context of existence, other than, say, the sentient welfare, and making the distinction between our sentience and the existence that exists beyond our sentience, and understanding how we exist and how we're part of the existence based on the linear process of things building up, and how understanding that is beyond our control, and understanding that consciously and making a difference ourselves. So I think that's all I want to say. So thank you, and until next time, bye.